I met Kyle Erb at a dinner in Austin in December, and then just kind of, we lost contact. But I was delighted when he reached back out to me recently because Kyle has recently been promoted as director of systems for one of the biggest franchises in the property management space. And he, as a technology guy, and somebody that has all this access to all these different franchises and practices, gets pitched all these different softwares. But because he's so technical, he has a real vision of what he believes AI is capable of, and he's been seeking it. So when he reached out to me after hearing the Lisa podcast where I interviewed our AI voice agent, it's clear it caught his attention, and the questions he was asking of our team was just at another level. So I really wanted to have him on the show to talk about this search of what he believes is possible, what he knows to be true, and what he won't stop until he finds for his franchisees so that you can benefit from the hard work and the kind of insider knowledge that he has on this strategy. This is a really, really enlightening conversation where I learned a lot about kind of the state of the market and what's truly possible from somebody that's very technical, has even more context than me, and is really out there doing the work unlike anybody that I've seen before. Enjoy this conversation with Kyle. Welcome to the Property Management Framebreakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. I think we start there in the sense of how far things have come, and you being able to be somewhere that is, it sounds like you've essentially been through modernizing processes from the ground up.
Yes. Yeah, when I first started with RPM, my job even before this, I was a project manager and, very much into processes and everything, just in a different industry. But we had a process system that was not designed for our industry or for what we were using it, right? It was a project management software that we were trying to use for process management. And I spent a while trying to get it to work for me, and eventually went to, the people that actually made it. And I realized, as they showed me all the functionality, I said, well, can it do this or this or this? And the answer was no, no, no. And then they told me, I said, I don't think that we're really a good fit. And they agreed with me. And so they helped me plan our exit from that system. And then I found out that Lead Simple, had started building a process capability in Lead Simple, and it was 1,000 times better than what the other system was. And primarily because it was built for our purposes, right? So I always tell our franchise owners that before you start using a system, you have to understand how it was intended to be used. And if you try to use it in a different way, expect it to feel clunky and broken, right? So that's kind of point one. But now, as I'm watching everything change so quickly, what Lead Simple had in their processes was a huge step forward because you could build out well-documented processes. You can go from point A to point B. You could build out conditional logic, so you could have branching decisions, right? And so the processes such as move in, move out, delinquency notifications, lease renewals, all of those, owner onboarding, property onboarding, all of those could be, at least the communication piece of them could be automated quite well. Now, the big limitation though is once you get a reply, you are now outside the automation, right? There is no follow-up or secondary type of communication that can happen there. If a tenant replies, it's now on the person to do that manually. If an owner replies, same thing. And so that's the limitation when you're using some sort of a template-based system, you don't have any other options. So that's what excites me about agentic capabilities, right? AI. And I think that having the ability to build a knowledge base so that the AI can actually respond to emails when they come in, especially simple questions that I mean, every property manager seems to have the same, 50 questions over and over and over again. And so whenever I talk to them about having some sort of just a receptionist to help answer the most basic questions, they get super excited about that.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. So I'd like to just I like to play the noble fool in the room, right? Like I feel like asking the question that people feel too embarrassed to say because you'll sound like too much of a novice always helps, our friend that's listening, that whatever, right? So like you said a couple things here, and I'd love to just kind of like settle on what are these differences, right? Because I think to someone like myself, a project management system and a process management system sounds very similar. And
Mhm.
then so then if we like add on this idea of like agentic AI, right? So let me tell you kind of like what it sounded like to me, and then you tell me how I'm doing here. Project management system is essentially like one linear project workflow where at each step you're kind of like it's like a better checklist where you're just kind of like making sure things are done, but you're making a decision at every moment. Project management system has some embedded decision making functionality within a certain boundary.
Yeah, so difference between a project and a process.
Yeah.
A project is a one-off, right? It's okay, here our goal is here. Now let's build basically a roadmap to get to that place. And that's what a project is. It is putting together all the pieces, the budget, all, what kind of things that we need to do. So that's what a project is. It's unique. A process is not unique. A process is the same basic thing. There can be different permutations of that process, but ultimately, when you're building some sort of process automation, you're just building to the common case, right? So you're building it so that it will work 80 to 90% of the time, knowing that the rest of the time it will require a human to step in. But hey, if you can take away 50% of the workload by doing that, it's a huge win.
Got it. And then there is agentic AI, which is something that can actually carry out that process for you within a certain amount of boundaries as well, I would imagine, right? How do you define
Right, exactly. Yeah. So your agentic capabilities give it the capability of actually responding to inbound communication, which is definitely not something that any process or templated communication can do. It can also answer questions that are not even part of that particular process.
it? Hmm.
People meander in their conversations, and especially, you might be talking to an applicant about their application, and they ask about random policies just so that they can make sure that this is really where they want to live, right? That's something that an agent could do that there's no way you could build that into a process.
Got it. And then the other thing that you mentioned is, are you using something for the way that it was built to be used, right? And to me, I think about this idea of like he who can define the problem the best will have the best solution, right? Like, are you like what problem are you solving, and like is that what it's here for? And I get the sense that there's been kind of like multiple generations of softwares in the property management space that went from software is meant to solve problems that aren't specific to property managers but worked for our problems, then softwares that are specific to property manager problems, right, that got way better, and now there's like this new breed with AI coming in. And I like to make the case of, if you're building natively with AI to solve a problem, you're going to get a much different result than if you had built something before and now you're bringing in AI to like adapt to the problem that you were solving before, but modernize it. What do you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in one of your recent podcasts, I heard you talking about the AI driven leader. So I picked it up. I've been reading it. I'm about halfway through at this point. And it's interesting. The book is more, I mean, he brings up AI a lot, but it's really about how to lead a team.
yeah,
And one of the things he brings up is, Elon Musk's most basic principles about delete, automate. I don't remember the exact steps at the moment, but basically, you first want to get down to, okay, what is the actual goal of the thing that you're trying to do, right? So, a lease renewal, your goal is to renew the lease. And of course, before you determine that that's your goal, you want to decide whether or not you actually want to renew the lease agreement with that tenant, right? I found that it's funny because with the lease renewal, a lot of property managers have this tendency to kind of dance around it. They'll ask for permission from the owner to do
mhm,
things, to do their own job, basically. And why would you do that? You're creating artificial barriers to accomplishing the goal that you have, right?
Mhm.
So instead of asking for permission, just informing them, making sure that they are aware.
Yeah.
We've done our research. Here's the decision that we've made. Let us know if you have any concerns or questions. And then when you reach out to the tenant, you don't need to have any kind of preemptive conversation before you send them a lease agreement. You just send them a lease agreement and then you follow up, right? So you're removing all that conversation that would have happened
Yeah.
and you're just sending a lease agreement because it gets you to the goal that much faster with
Yeah.
much fewer steps. And if you look at each of your processes like that,
Yeah.
you can think, okay, is it really necessary to have this conversation? No? Okay, let's delete that conversation and just move to sending the contract. And then we can explain what we've done in that contract
Yeah.
with a follow-up email or communication. And I think that in some ways, that removes a margin of error. It reduces the margin of error or the possibility for error, even
Mhm.
with AI. Because the thing that AI has that you and I do not have is unlimited patience with the person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're having a conversation with your receptionist AI, just messing with it,
Yeah.
it doesn't get upset or irritated or
Yeah.
impatient, right?
Yeah.
It just rolls with whatever you're doing and we'll have an hour-long conversation if you want it to.
Yeah.
And it will just keep going as if it's only been 5 minutes. Whereas you and I will grow impatient and we'll try to really get to the goal. So you can have some flexibility now with the amount of conversation that needs to happen in order to accomplish a goal. But simplifying it is still desirable because it reduces the chances for error.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, it has patience. And on top of that, it has unlimited bandwidth. Like it doesn't have to get off the phone with you to then go talk to somebody else. So there's no,
Right.
like, help me understand how does that relate to the idea of injecting AI into existing infrastructure versus building natively with AI? Are you saying that, like, if you were to build natively with AI, that there is so many things that you can skip over that it creates like another factor of like efficiency or effectiveness or something like that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that is what I'm saying
Yeah.
because you need to get down to here's the goal,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
here are a few key points that are important. That's where you stop, basically, right?
Yeah.
You only focused on your must-haves and you put guardrails around the AI and let it figure out how to accomplish the goals, right? You don't need to give it all this detailed workflow stuff that you would have to give, a workflow type system usually. It
Okay.
very much changes the way that you need to do things, right?
How does that affect my life as a property manager that would be a user? Like I could see how like as an engineer, I'm like, man, it's not a beautiful code or whatever, right? But like as
Yeah.
a as a user, how does that affect my life?
As a user, it keeps you focused on the goal
Yeah.
because we can get lost in the weeds so quickly. So if we know what the goal is and we always have, okay, here are the guidelines, but here's the goal, we know what is important to correct and what to just let go. It no longer becomes important to address things in a very, very specific manner as
Mm,
long as it's not giving incorrect information,
got it.
then it's fine. It can take the conversations elsewhere as long as it's accomplishing that goal.
Got it. So what I'm hearing, if I'm trying to make this like a user kind of like lived experience, it's I don't have to, let's say I'm updating notes in my system about how the lease renewal is going or how a work order is going. I don't have to type specific language in order for the next person to understand what I'm doing if I ever like leave it there, as much as I get to just communicate naturally and therefore it's just easier for that information to pass along and there's less chance of error by me, you know, getting a technicality wrong kind of thing. Is that where
Right. Yeah. And also imagine if you did try to template out a work order. When people call in, especially if they're panicking, they are not going to give you all the important information. They're going to express their frustrations and their emotions first, in many cases at least. And so you have to filter through those frustrations or emotions by asking good questions that then lead you to actually discovering what the problem is so you can put that into the work order. And I think that's something that up until now, AI has been very bad at
Mm,
because, well, here's an example. I was playing around with the Jotform AI agents the issue with the Jotform AI agent is that it's optimized for a form. Do you see where that's a problem? So if you optimize it for a form, it doesn't understand anything that doesn't map to that form in some way. It'll just ignore it or misinterpret it or yeah, I mean, so I played around with that for a while trying to get that to work. It was a youth service project that I was working on and trying to use the Jotform agent to make that easier. And I ended up just defaulting to the form because the AI agent actually made it worse for the user, right? So that's definitely not something we want to do. And it's because you either have an agent or a form. Combining the two is kind of a risky proposition. It reduces the usefulness of both.
I feel like that is the overall risk in the system, right? Like to me, that's what I was trying to explain with this idea of like building AI into an existing infrastructure. You risk, I think there's two ways of adapting to this AI future. I think there's people standing in the future and trying to reverse engineer it. That's what attracted me to the conversation that you and I have been having for a couple of weeks. And then there's people that are like, how do I adapt to this from the past? Right. Like, and that idea of like a jot form with an AI that the AI is always going to try to like fit it into a form based thing is kind of like a microcosm example of like you're trying to carry over the past as opposed to just like natively solving a problem like what you've discussed.
Now I think that so right now, Vendoroo specifically,
Mhm.
the way that you guys interface with, I don't know if you do with all the PM systems, but with Appfolio, you have it basically act like a user visually interacting just like a person does, right? Which I think is super cool, but it's very data intensive because it's having to interpret images and interpret where to click and right there's a lot there to interpret. Whereas if you can just pull in a feed from an API, that's something that a person can't do very well, but an AI can do extremely well. And now you're lowering your bandwidth, you're lowering your cost, and you're also increasing how precise things are. So you decrease your chance for any kind of error there. And I think that is something where some things from the old way of thinking do make sense, but you just have to be very careful about it, right? What is the purpose of keeping the old thing? I guess is the question that you need to ask.
In this example, is the old thing interacting like a user or is the old thing
In this case, the old thing would be an API.
Okay.
But in this specific case,
Yeah.
the API is actually the better approach because it reduces the cost.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of this is why I want to go deep into this with you, right? Because like you have this like knowledge of it in ways that I can't explain. I thought that was really that explains to me when we were on the call and we're like, yeah, this is how we tie into the system. And you're like, oh, you're actually doing that? Tell me why you think that's cool and kind of like what was your reaction to that? Like explain the story behind that.
Well, if you're familiar with ChatGPT's or OpenAI's operator, right? It's something that you currently have to pay for. I think it's 200 or 250 a month. I think it's 200 a month to have access to the operator. And then basically you can give it assignments or projects to work on, and it will navigate to different websites and open up a bunch of virtual windows and essentially use websites as if it were a person. Well, the reason why you can only use Operator if you pay the $200 a month subscription is because it is extremely data intensive to do that, right? A lot of the other capabilities that OpenAI has created, they've been able to make that available to the lower levels of subscription.
Got it. So it's the fact that we are doing that the way that OpenAI is doing it that you haven't seen anybody else doing.
Right. I knew that it's very data intensive, and that's why I was surprised about it too.
Got it. Interesting. Okay, so let's do this. I would love for you to tell me how you're thinking about I feel like we're standing in the future and trying to reverse engineer it, right? But you were just telling me that you've modernized systems already at RPM to a certain level. Give me a little bit. Is there a lesson to be learned in the first round of like modernization of systems for what you're doing in RPM to how you're carrying forward this like adapting to the AI future?
Well, okay. So I could see where AI was heading, right? And initially, the primary use case I could see for AI was a thought partner, right? Where you could just have a conversation with it to help you solve difficult problems and offer creative solutions. So the creativity part, there's no risk in using it that way, because as long as you keep your critical thinking hat on, that works super well, right? So that was where I started using AI with real property management, is figuring out areas where we are lacking. Where can we improve? What can we do better? From there, it started helping me produce better content, whether it's for our internal newsletter or presentations for my team members or for franchise owners, right? We've been able to use it in a lot of different ways. The agent capability is something that's really going to change the industry, though. So the example that I like using, Neighborly has a lot of brands, right? This is public information, so I can definitely talk about it. We have over 20 different brands. Most of them are home service brands, like Mr. Rooter, Mr. Electric, Molly Maid. All of these are home service oriented brands, and they're somewhat transactional. Yes, there is a relationship building aspect to it, but that the core of it is still transactional. And property management is a very different animal, right? We are 90% communication focused. There is a lot of repetition, but it's repetition in order to deepen the relationship, not to move on to the next transaction, right? So it's a very different way of approaching things. And I realized that aspect of property management actually makes us more vulnerable to disruption. We are inherently a more profitable industry than these other service brands, but we're also more attractive to disruption because we're more profitable. So if you look at where AI is really heading right now in fintech and healthcare, right? I mean, those industries are really getting disrupted right now because there's so much money in those industries. Property management, size-wise, is tiny compared to those two industries, but still property management is more profitable than home service, and home service is getting disrupted only on the edges because of the communication that you can do to interact with your customers and schedule appointments and follow up, right? Those kind of little micro interactions. But we need to build much more in-depth relationships with our customers. So the people that figure out how to do that will be much more disruptive to property management than these little micro interactions could ever be. So that's what's super powerful about the agentic capabilities, is that it's not just templated out interactions now. It is in-depth conversations built upon a knowledge base and maybe industry knowledge, as well as the legal framework that you have to be aware of within your state or county or sometimes city, right? Those little nuances are what have prevented some of the larger players from going nationwide.
I'm so pumped we're having this conversation right now, because my newsletter that I'm working on this week is specifically about this idea that property management is a people business, and people use that as a reason to say AI won't disrupt us. But I think it's the other way around. I think
do too.
Yeah, I think it's AI. If AI allows you to do all these like task-oriented things that normally stop you from spending the quality time that you need to create these deepened relationships, that's going to unlock a truly people business. And on top of that, one of the reasons why it's not more like it's a people business, but like the people want more customization in the way that they're treated. The people want you to like adapt to things that is prevented by the human scale of me being able to like promise 300 different things to 300 different property owners with 3,000 residents.
So I love that. Recently, I had a conversation with somebody. They wanted to adapt the lease renewal process as I had it created, because they wanted to make sure that they were able to meet with each property owner before renewing the lease agreement. And I thought, that's a really high value activity, to actually sit down and have a meeting with the property owner before you move forward with the lease agreement. So now they're having a yearly meeting with every single property owner, right? And at a minimum, that if they were to automate all of the mundane stuff, having that really important meeting, but also coming to that really important meeting with really good data, really good reporting. What's the CSAT? What's the NPS, right? Having this kind of data is suddenly could increase the impact of that meeting. And so I realized that, because at first I was a little bit resistant to having a meeting every single time you're going to renew a lease. But then I realized, if we free up our time by automating the rest of the process, we now can have that one-on-one conversation and connect with our owners. And maybe it's not for every single lease renewal, because maybe an owner has 50 properties that you are managing for them, right? Well, then in that case, maybe it's a quarterly meeting about their portfolio, right? So you adapt to the needs of the owner. It's really hard to adapt to the needs of the owner if you're doing everything manually. But if you have all the small stuff automated, you have the bandwidth to do that now. So I absolutely agree.
And how can we draw a distinction between small stuff automated and what this AI agentic kind of like transition looks like?
The distinction between what we have been calling automated versus agentic, well, it's where it stops, right? Having just automated templates is all outbound communication. And once it's inbound, that's where the system breaks down. And so it takes it several steps farther than you could ever do with some sort of templated workflow. Instead, you don't have to have a templated workflow. You give it a goal. I mean, it's night and day different, really. So let's say if we look at as far as, I mean, there might be more approaches, but if we just break it down into three, the first approach would be humans doing it all. It's super resource intensive. You know, I've talked to different franchises, some managing 500 doors with 30 people, another one managing 500 doors with, a dozen, and another one with 8 people. The difference between the team that can manage 500 doors with 30 people and the one that manages it with a dozen people is the difference between doing everything manually and doing everything with well-documented templated workflows. Yeah. Okay. Now take that. We're looking at that really customized, or really, I guess you could say, one-on-one, high-touch, 30-team thing, but now we're building agents over here. So we're able to give the quality that team of 30 was able to give with half as many people as the 12 people that we would have with well-templated workflows, right? And it changes the jobs of those people too. So it's two things, I would think. One job is human interactions that really matter, your high value human interactions. And the other thing is a manager of AI. So that's going to be a super important job, iterating, right? Correcting it, refining it. And in order to consistently refine what that process is, you have to have really great feedback mechanisms. And I think we're going to learn that over the next few years. The systems that don't have proper feedback mechanisms will fall apart. They'll just completely go off the rails. They will go out of business. The ones that build the best, most intuitive feedback mechanisms are the ones that are going to accelerate.
Super interesting. Okay. So this idea of what the future org chart looks like is something that I've explored in the newsletter, right? Like I agree. It's like, you want people that are out in the community being like a deep part of the community. You want people spending a lot of time with clients. You probably want people spending a lot of time with vendors, right? Like you want to be there in like the person to person, face to face thing. And then the manager of AI. Am I right in thinking if there's a manager of AI, it's kind of like, let's say I have a 1,000 door property management company. That means that I have, would it be fair to say I have 10 maintenance coordinators? Is it like one maintenance coordinator per like 10 doors, 100 doors or something like, or per 100 doors? Is that low, high?
One maintenance coordinator per 100 doors. Yeah, but it's more scalable than that, right?
Well, I'm just saying in general. I mean, like right now without AI.
Without AI, yes, but like I said, it is more scalable than that. As you get more maintenance coordinators, you can handle more and more properties. That is one of those positions that is more scalable the more you grow, for sure.
Correct. Let's say, that continues to scale, that means that they need to have some, like you don't want to have more than 6 direct reports. So somewhere around like 6 maintenance coordinators, you need another manager for like the maintenance coordinators. Now we're talking about, if you're a manager of AI, you're managing the AI, you need one really like expert maintenance person that can continually give the feedback to the AI, that can maintenance coordinate at scale almost like forever.
And if that person is doing it properly, they are also using AI as a thought partner. So they're not just basing it all on their own expertise and knowledge, but they are learning as they go what brings the best results, right? So that's where initially when I was trying to think through this, I was thinking, well, we need some sort of a survey afterwards that gets a CSAT or something like that, right? Yeah. And then I realized that's not really necessary anymore. You could
Yeah.
literally have it built into the conversation of, hey, how did I do today? If you
Yeah.
were to rate me like 1 to 10, what do you think you'd rate me today?
Yeah.
How would you rate this conversation? Are you happy with it, right? You could even
Yeah.
have it bring variability into how that question is asked so it seems
Yeah.
more natural
Yeah.
than just
Anything I could have
how.
done better for you today? Right.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could build that CSAT score into the conversation. So it's not like a
Yeah.
post-conversation survey. It is literally part of the conversation. So
Yeah.
it's natural and it would greatly increase your return rate. I think Podium's return rate on their review requests is something
Mhm.
like 1 out of 20, and that's if you personally ask the person for it, right? So it's really low return rate, but if you ask for it during the conversation, suddenly you can get that information back much more easily. And that's what you use to iterate, right? If you've been paying attention to the automated car race between Waymo and Tesla. So Waymo is ahead as far as the number of markets. Why? They took the templated approach. So they have these templated cities that they have very laid out with grids and everything perfectly mapped. And they have it's overfit to every single city in which they operate. Whereas Tesla took the much slower approach initially, where they're just cranking through tons and tons and tons of data in order to build AI that can then adapt to any environment within certain guardrails, right? And now that they're finally launching their automated vehicle rides, it's going to completely change the game because it's so much cheaper for them to
Yeah.
take that approach than it
Expand.
is to template out every single market that they happen to go into. I think it was like $7 per kilometer on Waymo, and Tesla's shooting for somewhere between 25 cents and 50 cents per kilometer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, right? That's a massive decrease in cost. Now, if we take that templated approach and then we look at AI and we look at how much more scalable it's going to be because it can adapt, whether you're dealing with 50 doors under management or 5,000 doors under management, it's not going to be that big of an increase. The primary increase will be those high value person to person interactions,
Yeah.
right? And the rest is super scalable.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting to be having this conversation now that Tesla literally just announced a robotaxi,
Yesterday,
like what this
right?
yesterday,
It was
Friday.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's super interesting, man. So we'll see how this ages by the time this podcast goes out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I mean, it's something different, man. Why now, right? Like, why do you think that this is? And I'll challenge you. Like, I think it's like good to have like like a
Sure.
like a confrontational conversation, right? But like, is this the promise of AI and the promise of these different things? That same message of like you're going to be able to do all this stuff feels like a message that now has been like out there for a really really long time. Why now? Why like is there something that you are uniquely seeing that makes it possible that you're so like on the trail of this? Have you always been on the trail of this? Is it like I got this promotion, so now it's go time? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it has zero to do with the promotion.
I didn't think so. Yeah.
For sure. It's all about just really paying attention to how things were progressing, right? My job has, from the beginning, been to help people improve their processes, right?
Yeah.
Help people get to the goal while keeping the quality high and the amount of effort low as far as per process, right?
Mhm.
So if you can save time while improving quality in order to increase the goal, that's
Mhm.
what a good process will do for you. Well, now this is, infinitely more productive and also much better quality as long as
Yeah.
we do it carefully, right? And I think that's going to be one of the things that we need to work with people on is how to really not build out, how to really figure out what the goal is and how to iterate quickly, right? People often see one thing that doesn't work properly and then they abandon it, right? I've had a lot of friends of mine come to me and say, oh, here's why AI can't work. It's because it's too dumb. It's just predicting the next word in a string of words, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, that's not quite true anymore. But even if it were true, the output that you get is only as good as the input. And so if you're working with AI and you're not getting the right output, it's because you're not giving enough information to it. You
Yeah.
need to get much better at the level of detail. And here's where something like Vendoroo really shines. You guys have already put a ton of that input into it, doing that hard work for somebody that otherwise would not have taken or may not have taken the time to build the right input and build the system out, right? Something that we've played around with and we're still looking into is a system like Podium, for example, that is not built for property management. They're really optimized for retail establishments or service establishments. So they have an AI agent capability, but there's no foundation there whatsoever. So we're going to have to build it from the ground up. And so the only reason that would make sense is if it were also able to take actions, which it won't be able to do. And so that's the thing that makes also Vendoroo a lot more powerful, is the fact that it can do the communication piece, but that communication piece, I'm going to be able to do that with a bunch of other systems, right? It's the action capability, the agentic capability that ultimately will make something much more valuable.
What steps you got? I recently saw on, I think it was Friday or Saturday, I saw Wolfgang Krosky talk about this agent that he developed himself, right? Like he's developing an AI and it seems like he's deploying it internally. If Wolf can't do it, why can't RPM do their own kind of like agentic stuff? Like what is, I literally sent this to my team. I'm like, why do we even exist if this guy can do this? Right? Like, which they have their own answers to it. But I wonder what your answer to that is.
Yeah. So we might.
Yeah.
We might want to,
Yeah.
but ultimately, Neighborly is not a software company. We're a franchise company, right?
Yeah.
So we sell franchises. I mean, that's kind of the core of it.
Yeah.
But we also sell franchises, and the definition of a franchise is a well-documented, templated business that you can purchase and roll out, right? Like a McDonald's or something.
Sure.
And so that doesn't mean that we are building software in order to do that. That's not our primary focus. So it's not our strong suit. Now, could we? Yeah, we could absolutely pay somebody to develop it for us. But in my previous job, I used to work with a lot of healthcare systems, a lot of hospital systems. And it was kind of interesting to see what happened in that space over and over again. These large hospital systems would dump millions upon millions of dollars into developing their own electronic health record systems. At the end, literally every single one of them moved over to one of the leading electronic healthcare records that everybody else was already using because it costs too much money to upkeep the system. And you want interoperability with other hospital systems and other healthcare systems. And that's just way easier if you're only dealing with a few of them, right? I don't know if that same thing will apply to AI. I think the AI is lowering the bar a lot to, the barrier to entry, I guess is a way to say it. It's lowering the barrier to entry. I've been able to just vibe code my way to basic applications that I never would have thought about doing. I'm not a programmer, but I understand the basics of what we need to put together to make certain things work. And as long as you have that basic knowledge, you can build software now. But, there would be, how do I say this? There's always a cost to maintain infrastructure. And if you can centralize that infrastructure, it lowers the cost of maintenance. And that's what those hospital systems kept realizing is the cost, right? And that's why healthcare is so expensive in the country, because they keep getting money from the government. They use that money to build infrastructure, but they don't think about how much that infrastructure is going to take to maintain.
Yeah.
And so the cost of healthcare keeps going up every time the government pumps more money into the system. What are the cheapest parts of the healthcare industry?
Outpatient centers.
They're the ones that don't get any money from the government, right?
Yeah, private.
Eye surgery or plastic surgery, those types of things, zero money from the government. And they're the ones that have plummeted in cost and skyrocketed in quality over time.
Interesting.
Because they have to optimize in order to keep going in their particular field. And I think that's where companies that try to do all things themselves ultimately end up being mediocre in all things. I have no aspirations to be mediocre in all things.
It's a shockingly similar response that I got as well. Like it was Raj who was like, yeah, I was at this one company. We try to build out our own infrastructure. Then we realized we're going to be spending $500 million, like $500 million or like $500,000 a year just to maintain it, when really we could just use Gmail and spend $100,000 a year kind of thing. Right. That makes sense. Okay.
Very much so. Yeah.
That helps me sleep better at night and trust the answers I got. Kyle, is there anything else that we haven't hit on before before I go off any other kind of like rabbit holes and run out of time that you'd want to talk about?
Nothing specific.
Fresh off the press, we are now tracking these next level stats of what Vendoroo is doing for clients. I want to share a couple of these with you right now. In June, we've taken 7,252 calls for our clients. That's 106 hours of calls that they did not have to be on. They could use their time for other things. This is just June. We have handled 318 work orders, sent 653 messages, and answered 332 questions. This is all time back in your pocket. And the average out here is that 84% of work orders across the entire client portfolio are being handled without our clients having to touch them at all. Some are much higher than that. Some are like 90, 95%, right? This is just the average of what's happening across the portfolio. Imagine the amount of time that saves you. Imagine the capabilities that gives your team to actually go spend time doing things that move the needle. If you want to have access to that type of capacity, build an AI-first maintenance department and give owners, which they've finally been asking for, which is time with you and your team for things that matter, then come check us out at vendoroo.ai. You won't be disappointed.
I think that every single business leader needs to seriously start figuring out how to incentivize their teams to start thinking critically. We need to unrobotize our entire industry. We need to start elevating the capabilities of our teams. We need to start challenging them to think critically. When they come to us with a problem, they should be coming to us with multiple solutions along with the problem. And we need to start holding them accountable to that expectation. Unless we have critical thinkers on our team, there is no chance that we can successfully manage agents.
Unpack that for me.
So if you're just having somebody do the same thing every time, they're not necessarily becoming an expert. They're becoming a specialist in something really specific. But if that really specific system breaks, you have to have an outsider come in to fix it, right? If their job is to fix it, they can't be a specialist. They have to at least be somewhat of a generalist so that they understand the big picture, right? In the book I'm reading, he talks about how you can't read the label from inside the box. He says that over and over, and it makes so much sense that you have to be able to back up and look for solutions in order to fix the problems. And that's where critical thinking comes in, and asking yourself, why am I doing this thing? What is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And if you have somebody who is out of alignment, well, you have to be sure that you have communicated very clearly to your team what the goals are, and make sure that their actions are aligned with with your goals, right? And so I think that having a team of critical thinkers is going to be extremely important. We are going to have to step away from repetition and assembly lines.
I love it, man. It's interesting, right? The AI-driven leader that you mentioned is a book on leadership. And the more I dig into kind of like where this is going, mm-hmm. leadership is going to be such a crucial part of the equation, from the standpoint of like, how do you, like, we are all change management leaders right now, right? Like, we are going through a giant context shift, and how do we do this? And you mentioned, to me, the essence of leadership is painting the vision so that it's very, very clear, mm-hmm. being able to like put somebody into context of that vision of like, are you in line with this, right? Like, laying out a part where my goal for this vision matches like aligns with your goal for this vision, letting you know kind of like where on that journey you are, continuing to reinforce, are you further, are you behind, helping make those course corrections, and keeping that really, really clear. And that's kind of like what I'm hearing from you. How are you, have you seen anybody that's either you with your team of how you're incentivizing this like critical thinking kind of role, or in your franchises that you work with? Do you see anybody that's doing that really well, that there's maybe like a lesson to be told on either how you're holding meetings or any kind of like unlock that you've seen?
Yeah. So, okay. It boils down to accountability. So we as an organization have been rolling out, there's a bunch of different systems that you can roll out to really drive accountability, right? And when you're focused on accountability, you can drive home what actually matters. So with each person's role, okay, here's what you're accountable to, and here's how that accountability or those goals tie to our big goal as a team, right? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And what's interesting is that the job of an AI agent manager will be essentially holding that agent accountable to its goals, right? making sure that it continues on the true north direction. Otherwise, it's going to end up going off the rails. Now, the same thing applies to your team members, but the team members have a lot more autonomy as long as they understand what the goals are of the company and what their goals are, in the terminology that we've adopted, the big rocks, the short-term rocks, all that fun stuff. I'm sure you've heard of that. But yeah, I think that's how you have to start working with your team. And we've rolled that out. It is still in the process of being implemented, but it's something that I think is super impactful to all teams to have basic accountability and an understanding of what the overarching goals of a team are.
Whatever the system is, it is that you use, whether it's Traction or another system or whatever, that allows people to understand where the goal is, what the steps are towards the goal, help you wayfind on your path towards that goal through these steps, and continuing to keep that present is just like, that's leadership, right? And then celebrating the win afterwards, right? That's a little bit of leadership.
Oh yeah. Got to celebrate the win.
Got to celebrate the win. Kyle, anything else, man?
No, that's about it for me.
This was awesome, man. It's interesting to like how the world turns of just, we end up at this dinner together in Austin, and then you're coming in and you're just kind of like leading I haven't had anybody come into us with such like a fervent, like, curiosity and also deep insight into kind of like what is actually happening and what isn't happening. And it's been really, really cool to kind of like go through this, man. I hope it all works out to the outcome that, everybody on my side wants, but like, it's
I mean,
it's been a real pleasure, man.
I told you my dream, right?
Yeah. Give me the dream. Give me the dream.
The dream, you guys are focused on maintenance.
Yeah.
And the dream is, right now there's no system that has a fully capable host of agents, I guess you could call it, handling every type of tenant, owner, and vendor communication. That's the dream. Regardless of the process, being able to handle maintenance, being able to handle finding new properties to manage, onboarding of owners, onboarding of properties, right? Lease renewals, delinquencies, collections, all of the things, move out communication, move in communication, all of that is doable. It's just a matter of putting in the work to put together the knowledge base so we can make that happen, testing it, making sure that it's working properly, and then continuing to iterate from there, right? So you guys are just at the beginning of that, but I feel like you are on the forefront at the moment. As long as you don't rest at all, you're going to be in a very good place.
What makes you think that we're at the forefront? Is it just first mover advantage? Is it a philosophy of how you've seen us approach this? Like, what is there to be learned there? Because I have my own thoughts on it.
So it's the difference between AI first and, we do AI too. Let's build in AI features. Like, AI features are gimmicks.
Yeah.
AI first is not. And as long as it really truly is AI first, right? Where the AI is the foundation rather than a feature. If you have a foundation of something and then you have a feature that is AI, that's all it is. It's just a gimmick. It might add a little bit more functionality to what you have here and there, but it's not going to be able to do everything that an AI agent would be able to do otherwise. So I think that's why what you guys are doing right is that you started with the AI and then figured out how to apply the AI in the best way possible instead of taking the opposite approach.
Yeah, that's what I keep telling people. Like, to me, is the genius that I see in it. It's just like that whole starting with the outcome is the thing that really differentiates us, right? Like, I don't see a world where, as we're right now doing these like categorical exercises and trying to figure out our differentiation. And I don't know what the future of that holds, but to me, really what's different, what attracted me to this whole thing is this idea that, like, starting with this idea of like, no, okay, the outcome needs to be, take this completely off your plate.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and then however we get there using AI, that's the thing, but you gotta solve that Monday morning problem first before you solve the big one. So like, we've evolved from owning that outcome with a person using AI to now owning the outcome with AI that has a human in the loop. That's like the AI manager piece, but it was absolutely necessary, right? Like, if not, we wouldn't have gotten there if it would have been like building upon the past as opposed to reverse engineering the future. What is a future? So like, maybe we were were the first to take this approach. There's for sure going to be other companies that take this approach, right?
Yeah. And you guys aren't even the first, by the way,
Okay.
right?
Oh, interesting.
I mean, now Elise, there's an
Yeah,
example of
true.
one that has like an 8-year lead on you guys.
Yeah.
But they have this weird limitation where they will only communicate with the tenant. And I think that's such a huge miss. And it might make sense within the context of major multifamily because you don't need to communicate with the owner as much. You can just have a one-on-one meeting
True.
with an owner,
Yeah.
you know, once a week or once a month. But with single family, you absolutely need to have more touch points with your owners.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have your own necessarily have your own maintenance team or, you know, really solid vendor relationships that you can 100% count on.
Yeah. What
And
is the
so
problem
you
you're about to
need the
solve?
ability to talk to more than just the tenant in order to have it fully capable. So they're ahead of you guys, and it's
Okay.
crazy to see what they're doing.
Okay.
But they've pigeonholed themselves mentally into no, we just want to be really good at this one thing. And that's the old way of thinking about it. You can easily, if you've got that capability to talk to a tenant, you can branch out and say, you know what, let's talk to an owner this way and a vendor this way. In fact, you could even have it out communicate with the team member in the same fashion, right? Like you could really go in every single direction in order to train the team member how to train it. You could have it interacting.
Yeah.
Right?
What is a future differentiator, right? Like, let's say, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback, and that makes a lot of sense, right? No, we weren't the first. We're just the first to do it for this exact problem.
Right.
When within a year, I'm sure there's going to be 5 other people that are doing it,
Oh,
right?
for
Like,
sure.
okay,
Yeah.
we have a little bit of a lead on like the AI and the training, and we've made more mistakes than you for now, right? A future differentiator in this like agentic AI thing, is there one? Like, does it all just kind of like race to? Yeah, that's what I'm
I
having a
don't
hard time figuring
know.
out. Yeah.
I mean, that is an unknown. I
Yeah.
don't know what the answer to that is.
Okay.
Right? I don't think this is going to behave like anything else that we've seen in our lives.
True.
And so it's really hard to predict what direction it's going to go. Will we each just have our own AI assistant that we use for whatever we want? And we buy like, I don't know, you know, in the Matrix where he just downloads Kung Fu.
Yeah. And the
Maybe
helicopter
that's
program.
right, exactly. So maybe, and
Yeah.
hopefully it's not in our own brains, but maybe we have this AI agent that we just use and you know, and we just say, oh yeah, install the Vendoroo module into my AI agent so that he can start doing the maintenance capabilities or the property management capabilities, right? Maybe that's the future of AI agents is you just purchase a training module to train your personal AI on how to do the thing you need it to do. And you add it, and that's the thing that I think OpenAI is doing right, is its memory of who you are as a person and how you like things to work. So then you could tack on modules onto that and augment the capability while still remembering who you are and how you like to do things. So I don't know, maybe that's the direction things will go, because I think that is something that OpenAI is doing right, is the capability of remembering the person that it is working with.
Kyle, you're the man. This is awesome. I really
Yeah, it
appreciate it.
was.
Like, yeah, that was exactly what I wanted to do.